Brothers and sisters, our future depends on unity and dignity with India. We are building partnerships of equals, where Africa's resources no longer serve the interests of others, but the prosperity of our people. This cooperation is not charity, it is sovereignty. Together we are proving that the Global South can rise strong and free.
They struck the deal when no one was watching. 14 billion in grain shipments from India to Burkina Faso, a twist so bold it rewrote the playbook on who feeds Africa. Imagine a rising military leader named Ibrahim, positioned like he's rewriting history not just for his country, but for an entire continent. That deal marked more than drought relief, it was a power handshake signaling a shift from dependency to influence. And in just a moment, you'll see how this moment connects to a broader shift in how Burkina Faso is speaking to the world. Stick around because what comes next makes that grain deal feel like the opening act of a much bigger story. India and Burkina Faso, distant on the map, partners in peace through subsistence. That's what it seemed. But when Captain signed off on that $14 billion grain deal with India, he wasn't just battling hunger, he was challenging old scripts. No more Western NGOs trying to soften control with aid. Instead, this was sovereign trade, South-South style. It didn't just feed mouths, it fed a narrative of self-reliance and respect. And yet, this was only step one of what became a sweeping economic shift. Wait till you hear how the mining sector joined the performance next. Just weeks after that grain deal swung another hammer, this time in the mines. Burkina Faso moved to nationalize gold sites like Bangu and Wagnian, taking back control from Western corporations. He said, "We know how to mine our gold. I don't get why multinationals come do it for us." But the claim didn't drop there. It was echoed through gold-hungry headlines and investor panic from Australia to Canada. It seemed like a bold power play to reclaim Africa's own wealth. And this wasn't isolated, because next we'll see how alliances across the Sahel added strategic depth to the shift. Then came the political move. Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali exited ECOWAS and launched the Alliance of Sahel States, a regional pivot beyond Old West African ties, saying they'll chart their own path militarily, economically, politically. Imagine drawing a new map where partnerships are shaped by shared history, not Western patronage. And as this alliance gained ground, India quietly partnered with Burkina Faso, signaling something even bigger. But how did this all connect back to India's decades-long ties with Burkina Faso? That's coming next. Back in the 1970s and 80s, India and Burkina Faso had a straightforward partnership: tractors and training, seeds and irrigation, rural electrification, vocational centers, and scholarships under Team 9 and other programs. That was soft power. But now, with at the helm and India rising as global supplier of both grain and tech, the nature of that relationship shifted from benevolent outreach to strategic partnership. It became about mutual sovereignty, trade, infrastructure, capacity building on terms set by African actors. And wait, because this method of cooperation now spans beyond India, extending through broader South-South networks. This is the heart of the transformation, South-South cooperation, where African ambitions claim space not through Western aid, but through collaboration with Asia, Latin America, and beyond. India's grain, training, and loans, Turkey's development, Bangladesh's microfinance ideas and women's empowerment, Cuba's healthcare frameworks and solidarity. It is an ecosystem of partners who don't fix Africa on their timeline, they support Africa on hers. This isn't charity, it's agency speaking across borders, and Burkina Faso, has become a loud voice in that chorus. But the shift isn't just economic, it's political too, and that's where our final section dives deeper. None of this is accidental. Under E's rule, Burkina Faso isn't laying low, it's asserting sovereignty. That grain deal, that mining takeover, the exit from ECOWAS, each move signals a break from dependency, a claim to self-determination. Some see it as risky, others call it liberation, and in pulling in partners south instead of north, is reshaping how African leadership talks to the world. This isn't rebellion for rebellion's sake, it's constructing a new framework. And when leaders in Ouagadougou say they're no longer pawns, they're making a declaration. But where could this all lead? That vision becomes clearer in the final wrap. You've followed the trail, a bold grain deal that sparked a resource takeover, pulling in new allies and fueling a politics of self-direction not dictated by Western scripts, but authored by African ambition. It's a story of cooperation over charity, sovereignty over subsidies, and vision over vouchers. Ibrahim. E's moves are still unfolding, but one thing is clear. Partnerships with India and other global South nations aren't stopgaps, they are cover, shelter, and scaffolding for a new kind of African architecture. This is an ending unlike most others. It doesn't say that's it. Instead, it closes the loop that began with hunger and it returns you to it, but transformed by what's changed. Africa doesn't just eat anymore. It trades, learns, builds, and leads. And if what you've seen here is part of that shift, then the last glance is simple. The future doesn't repeat the past, it rewrites it. But here's where the narrative sharpens even more. Namibia enters the frame. While Burkina Faso captures headlines for its bold defiance and resource sovereignty, Namibia is carving out a subtler, yet equally strategic, pathway with India. On the surface, it's about trade uranium, diamonds, fisheries, and even green hydrogen. But underneath, it's about positioning. Namibia is quietly becoming the hinge that connects African resources with India's long-term energy and security ambitions. Think about uranium for a moment. Nuclear energy is more than power plants, it's national independence, and Namibia, holding some of the world's largest uranium deposits, suddenly finds itself in possession of the very mineral India needs to fuel its reactors and reduce reliance on fossil fuels. If Burkina Faso is the story of reclaiming sovereignty through grain and gold, Namibia is the story of shaping tomorrow through minerals. Now imagine the parallel, one nation demanding control from foreign mining giants, another offering partnership to supply a rising Asian superpower. Different strategies, same outcome, Africa choosing its own terms, and India, unlike some Western powers, steps into this space not with the weight of conditionality but with offers of training, infrastructure, and reciprocal markets. The pattern becomes clear. This is not just a trade transaction, it's a strategic triangle. Burkina Faso's agricultural and mining revolution, Namibia's uranium, hydrogen, and diamond leverage, India's hunger for resources, markets, and global influence. Each piece reinforces the other. But here's where it grows even more interesting. For decades, Africa was painted as the passive backdrop of global rivalry. Colonial masters drew the maps, Cold War superpowers funded the conflicts, and international financial institutions set the economic rules. Now, leaders like Ibrahim and Namibia's policymakers are saying, no. We decide how our resources are used, and who benefits. That change sends a shockwave far beyond the Sahel or the Namib Desert. It ripples into boardrooms in Paris and Washington, where executives once assumed perpetual access. It unsettles policymakers in Brussels and Ottawa, who thought aid was enough to secure loyalty, and it even reaches Beijing, where China, along the dominant external partner in Africa, now faces competition not just from the West, but from other global South nations like India. This is what makes the India-Namibia link, tied to Burkina Faso's wider defiance, so powerful. It shows a world where Africa is no longer the periphery, it is the pivot, and consider the symbolism. In 2022, Namibia signed a green hydrogen agreement with the EU, a project valued in billions. But within a year, conversations with India opened fresh doors. If Europe is trying to buy the future of African energy, India is trying to co-create it. That distinction resonates, because where Europe offers funding tied to conditions, India emphasizes collaboration grounded in history, non-alignment, South-South solidarity, and shared development struggles. The consequence? A more balanced negotiating table. But let's zoom back out. What do these moves mean not just for Burkina Faso or Namibia, but for the idea of Africa itself? It means that sovereignty is no longer only about waving a flag or reciting a national anthem. It's about leveraging resources, grain, gold, uranium, hydrogen in ways that shift the global order. The story of Ibrahim and the India-Burkina Faso deal was the spark. The Namibia connection is the fuel. Together, they mark the quiet birth of a South-South century, where African nations set terms not as aid recipients, but as equal players. And if history is any guide, these kinds of shifts don't happen smoothly. There will be backlash. Sanctions, pressures, and whispered coups are not out of the question. Already, Burkina Faso's defiance has drawn sharp Western criticism. Namibia, too, faces scrutiny as it deepens ties with India, a country often viewed by the West as a rival in global influence. But here lies the paradox. The more resistance Africa meets, the stronger the case for South-South solidarity becomes, because each threat of punishment reinforces the truth that dependency comes at a cost, and autonomy, while risky, holds rewards that aid could never provide. So what we're witnessing is not just trade, and not just politics, it's a redefinition of power itself. In the decades ahead, when energy grids in Mumbai hum with uranium from Namibia, and grain from India steadies Burkina Faso's food supply, the proof will be undeniable. Africa is not being helped. Africa is helping shape the global balance, and that is where the story circles back. From hunger relief in Ouagadougou to uranium contracts in Windhoek, the pattern is unmistakable. African nations, aligned with India and the global South, are no longer reacting to global history, they are writing it.